So you're basically requiring your constituents to go through an additional level of bureaucracy rather than just let them choose. I mean, I guess I just don't understand, because the whole compromise of the committee was allowing individual choice. I understand that you don't like the Real ID program. I get it. We all have heard about it for 5 years, at least the 5 years that I've been here. I know that you've been harping about it, and I get it. You don't like it. But I don't understand why, when we craft a committee substitute compromise, which allows you, who don't like it, to not have to have it, but allows the rest of us who could really give a rip one way or the other to go ahead and get one, why you think that we shouldn't have that right. Why should we not have the ability to get one? You haven't articulated that to anybody.
Okay, I'm always confused when you say a non-real ID driver's license.
I'm talking about a non-real ID compliant driver's license, which is what your bill says is the only driver's license that will be allowed to be implemented by the Department of Revenue.
Okay, right now you can get
Gentlemen, I don't care about right now. I care about what happens when your bill goes into effect.
Okay. Why would you want a real ID driver's license?
Maybe I think it's fun. It doesn't matter what difference. It doesn't make a difference why I want one or why I don't want one. What matters to me is that you took that decision away from me and all of my constituents. You know, and I think it's an invasion of my privacy for you to even ask me that question.
Okay.
It shouldn't matter why I want to have one or not have one.
Your requirement would require specialized driver's license to be issued, as opposed to being a uniform all the way across the state. If you're concerned, if Real ID becomes effective, you can get a Real ID compliant ID.
A passport or...
No, just a card, Real ID. Or you can get a passport. You got to realize these are not cheap. We have not talked about the cost of this program.
Gentlemen, the fiscal note... They're already doing what is compliant. There is no microchip. There is no retinal scan. There is none of this stuff that you're claiming that would make it expensive. That's not in the final rule. I think you're stuck in 2005, gentlemen.
Nope.
This is 2009. We have a final rule, which is nowhere near the 2005 bill that you talked about all through committee in your testimony and that you've continued to talk about all on this floor.
A real ID non-compliant card will cost you $60 plus. You can call the Department of Homeland Security right now.
Why is that? Why would it cost $60 to have a non-compliant card?
Because the cost of getting it.
The cost of getting it, we're the ones that issue it. We're not getting it from the federal government. The Department of Revenue would be the one issuing it. We currently issue non-compliant driver's license. There's no difference. There's no change.
Right. And to get a Real ID compliant driver's license?
No. Right now I can't. And under your bill, I can't. Under the compromise, I could if I wanted to. And I'm just confused as to at what point you went from being a champion of individual rights and a champion of privacy to being a totalitarian and saying the government knows better, we know better, and we're not going to give you that choice. I'm just confused as to when that occurred.
I am protecting the rights of individuals to not have their personal information compromised, to get away from you having to show an ID every time you go into a federal building or an aircraft or any place else.
I'm going to have to show that ID.
Pardon?
I'm going to have to show an ID to get on an airplane or a federal building whether this bill passes or not.
Yeah,
all you're doing is making it more difficult and making me go through an additional level of bureaucracy to get a form of identification that I don't have readily available in my back pocket, such as my driver's license. And I don't understand that. I don't understand how when you were given away to not have to deal with it, to not have a Real ID license, when we gave you that opportunity and the committee spoke overwhelmingly, why that wasn't good enough for you, gentlemen, why you had to take that right away from everybody else.
Everybody has the right to whether they want to get a Real ID if they went through or not.
A Real ID driver's license. Under your bill, everybody has the right to get a Real ID driver's license. Is that what you're telling me? Because I'm pretty sure the language says shall not amend procedure.
Right.
Okay, so then you're... Did you misspeak, gentlemen, or did you misunderstand or mischaracterize? Which one? I'll give you three choices.
Pardon?
Misspeak, misunderstand, or mischaracterize. Which was it?
On which?
On the fact that you said that we would have the choice to get a Real ID compliant or non-Real ID compliant when your bill makes it explicitly illegal to get a Real ID compliant.
When this bill passes, we will reject Real ID in Missouri. We will not require the citizens to get a real ID, to go through all the steps.
But you also will not allow citizens to get a real ID, correct?
What?
To get a real ID compliant driver's license.
You can get a real ID card.
Does your bill allow our citizens to get a real ID compliant driver's license?
No.
Exactly. Under the committee substitute, we allowed the individual the right to choose whether they got a real ID compliant driver's license or not. I'm trying to understand when you decided that your will superseded the individual's right to make that decision for themselves. Can you tell me when that occurred?
No, I'm not superseding their will. We're confusing issues here. We're talking apples and oranges here.
What's the apples and oranges? Whether a person gets to choose for themselves or whether the government chooses for them?
Nope.
Okay, so you're choosing for them. If this body passes your bill, the government has made that decision for them.
We make decisions here all the time for the people of the state.
I understand that.
Right.
But we also provide opportunity for the individual to make a decision for themselves.
Sometimes we do, sometimes we not. You don't have a decision whether you want a driver's license or not if you're going to drive.
That's true. If I want to choose to drive, I have to go through and get... Right. And if I would like to get on a federally regulated aircraft or enter a federal courthouse or enter a nuclear power plant, I will have to take identification with me, which under your bill, my driver's license will no longer be good enough for.
That's not true. I read through you yesterday where...
Really? How is that not true? How will my non-Real ID compliant driver's license allow me access to a federally regulated aircraft?
I'm going to read from you from the Department of Homeland Security's
additional
website.
Documentation, gentlemen. Don't misunderstand me. I understand that I could take that non-Real ID license with me when I get on the plane. I'm just also going to have a copy of the birth certificate and a passport.
Wrong. I'm going to read from you. Real ID current status from the Department of Homeland Security's
Is this 2005 or 2008, gentlemen?
This is, it was printed off yesterday, so it's fairly current.
Well, I don't care when it was printed. When was it written? I could have printed the Federalist Papers yesterday.
Okay, this is their website as effective as of yesterday.
Whose website?
Department of Homeland
YouTube?
Security's.
What?
Department of Homeland Security.
Okay. When was the documentation created, though? Because they post archives.
You mean it's not up to date?
I'm asking you. I want you to prove
I would assume that it's up to date without looking at the date on it. All states have received an extension. Your state has been granted a Real ID extension.
Right, we understand that.
Your current driver's license is still a valid form of identification for boarding a federally regulated aircraft, assessing a federal facility.
Right, so we've been granted an extension.
Department of Homeland Security, their own website says you can use those for boarding an aircraft.
Under the extension, which will expire. When does the extension expire, gentlemen?
2011, unless it's extended.
Okay, so there is a point in time when under your bill, I will not be allowed... I just don't... I'm just so flustered by the fact that you dance around the crux of the issue, which is at some point under your bill, my driver's license will not be considered a federally qualified form of identification.
Why won't it be?
Because it won't be Real ID compliant. When the extension expires on the exemption, then guess what? You have to have a Real ID compliant form of identification, which my driver's license will no longer fit under because of your bill. Now, under the committee sub, I could have made that decision, and I could have said, you know what? I don't give a rip about all of the people who are concerned that Real ID is going to be the big boogeyman in the closet, and I'm going to go ahead and get one. But now I don't have that decision, and none of my constituents have that decision if we pass your bill.
You could go to another state and get a Real ID driver's license.
So everybody who wants a federally... So you're just telling people to move out of Missouri? Here,
No.
when we have unemployment at 8.9%, when we're trying to figure out how to create jobs and attract people to this state, you're saying, I think the federal government is the boogeyman, move out if you don't like it? Is that what you're telling me?
Nope, that's not what I'm saying.
That's not what you're saying.
Nope.
You just said move to another state if you don't like it.
If you want one, yes.